into very, very simple parts that our body can actually absorb. So this morning, if you ate a Pop-Tart for breakfast, well, little chunks of Pop-Tart do not go into your blood and float around to all your cells. Sorry to break the news. But as you ate that Pop-Tart, it was broken down into very, very simple things. So Pop-Tart has, the pastry part has starch in it, fats, things like that. There's lots of sugar in the frosting and stuff. All right, all that stuff is broken down by enzymes. Enzymes allow large molecules to be broken into smaller molecules. So things like glucose, fatty acids, amino acids. These are like the very simplest building blocks of those foods that you eat. And so that, in our digestive system, those large foods get broken into these small little pieces that we can actually absorb into our blood. And those are the things that make their way to our cells. Simple things, amino acids and glucose and things like that. So that process of getting it broken down and moving it into the blood, that's what the digestive system does. So there's two ways that this happens. And we call them mechanical digestion and chemical digestion. What do you think? What does mechanical digestion mean? Peter?
When you put like food into a blender and then you use it through straw.
Well, that would be an example, but otherwise, how would you do that without the use of the blender, Bianca?
Liquid. Chew it.
You would chew it. Yeah, chewing food is mechanical. It's breaking it into smaller chunks. It's not really changing it into anything else. It's still little chunks of Pop-Tart. They're just much smaller. All right, Nick, pay attention. So it's breaking it into smaller pieces that your body can start to break down. So that's mechanical digestion. So if you're eating this veggie burger, as it's shown in this picture, that's going to be first chewing it up and swallowing it. That's mechanical digestion. Starts in your mouth. The more you chew your food, the better and the more quickly you'll be able to digest it. Because by chewing, you increase the surface area of that food. You ever swallow a big chunk of food, hurts the whole way it's going down your throat? That's not a good way to eat. Chew that food up as well as you can. And then the process of chemical digestion begins. What's that, Ryan?
It's like where's your stomach acid dissolves food?
Yeah, it's where the food is dissolved and actually it's changed. So once it's chemically digested, it's no longer a little chunk of Pop-Tart. It's now sugars and stuff like that. That process actually doesn't start just in the stomach, though. It actually begins in the mouth. Chemical digestion begins with saliva. Saliva, it's not just water. It's a mixture of water and several enzymes that start to break down food chemically. Each day you produce about 2 to 3 of these full of saliva every day in your mouth. The majority of it you just swallow, but that saliva has enzymes in it. One of the biggest enzymes there is salivary amylase. Salivary comes from your saliva. Amylase is what it breaks down. Actually, it breaks down starches. If you were to take a saltine cracker, it's basically starch. If you chew it up and you keep it in your mouth for a long time, you got it all wet, and just let it sit there, chew it around, keep it in your mouth. What you may notice is it starts to taste sweet eventually as you let it sit. Because what happens is this salivary amylase actually breaks down the starch, and what starch breaks down to are simple sugars, glucose. And so your saliva breaks down those starches into glucose. Sometimes maybe in 9th grade or 10th grade you may do this lab. They have a lab where they take a cracker and they mix it with a little water, smash it up, and they test it for glucose using a glucose strip. And the first test usually shows there's no glucose there, it's just starch. But then they have people save up their saliva in a little tube. And after a few minutes, you do the glucose test again, and you see that there is glucose present. That the enzymes in the saliva break down that starch into glucose. So Chemical digestion is using enzymes to actually chemically change this food into their smaller pieces. And we have in our mouths these glands, salivary glands, up sort of on the outsides of your cheek and in the back. And they sort of spray saliva in your mouth every now and then. They really get kicked into gear when you're hungry or when you smell food. Okay, do you ever, your mouth, that's what it means when you see your mouth is watering. Okay, it means that you've smelled food or you're thinking about it, and your salivary glands are getting you ready to eat that food by producing saliva. Or did you ever yawn or something when you're reading a book, and sometimes a little spray of saliva sprays on your book?
No.
Your salivary glands just spray saliva in your mouth. Right? If your mouth happens to be open, a little spray of saliva comes spraying out of your mouth. Yeah. That ever happen?
Can't people do that?
Oh, I'm sure it's happening to people.
I think my dad can do that where you just...
Some people can do it, yeah. If you had your mouth open and you're reading, there's a little spray of saliva on your mouth. That never happened? Yeah, I'm sure it happened. You guys are just lying. Who knows what I'm talking about? So, thank you. Only okay. All right. So anyway, digestion begins in the mouth. From there, then the food that we chew up, hopefully into small pieces,
We're
moves in.
talking about our esophagus and art. It's your
Why art?
esophagus.
How is it related to art?
I don't even know.
Okay. So anyway, the esophagus is the tube that carries food from your mouth down into your stomach. So in your neck, you have two tubes. One carries food. What's the other carry?
It's liquid.
Water.
Oh, because we were talking about choking.
No, they both go.
Wait.
Food and water.
Wait,
Hold on. All
sorry.
right. I'll answer your question, but first, food and water both goes through the same tube, your esophagus. Air goes through your trachea, which you might call your windpipe. And so when you swallow, you actually have a little flap. When you have food in your mouth, you swallow. This little flap covers your trachea, your windpipe, so that no food goes down there. Because getting food in your trachea is what choking is. Getting a chunk of food into your trachea means air can no longer go down your trachea into your lungs, and so you're choking. All right, Abby?
So it's not possible to choke on water.
You can choke on water.
You can drown.
You can't.
Yes, you can.
Nick is right.
Different than choking on
So,
water, though.
so
Choking.
you cannot.
Choking.
All right, so let's talk about this. So two
But it
things.
can't get stuck because
No.
it's a liquid.
I would call.
It goes
So
into
you
your
can't
lymph
choke.
nodes.
All right, hold on. So choking
But
is
drowning is
blockage of the windpipe by
Yeah.
a solid chunk of something.
So
Drowning
water is a
is
liquid, so
inhaling liquid.
Well, then you can't choke.
You cannot choke on water.
Well, then how do you start having like a coffee
I have a
fit
question.
when
Wait,
you're
Because so
air.
all right, listen. Hold on.
Okay,
You
so
can't
you
get
can't
water
choke on
in.
air.
All right, hold on,
This is
hold on.
coffee,
Hey,
right?
hold on. So you can't get. You don't want water in your lungs. You get water in your
Honestly,
lungs,
water can't get into your
you're
lungs, I told
drowning.
you.
You cough to get rid of that water.
Yes, so you don't choke on it. You just cough.
No,
Yeah.
but water can still go into your lungs.
Yeah, but
And that's called drowning.
I told you.
Yeah.
Drowning, hey.
All right, girls, thank
Is
you.
it like, what's the other pipe that happens when you're choking when your food goes down the other pipe and then...
So if you say, oh, you food went down the wrong tube, really what it means is you're choking on a chunk of food. So if it's a tiny little piece of food, it may go into your lungs, you may start coughing. Coughing is trying to get rid of that stuff that went into your trachea and to get rid of
Wait,
it.
so there is two pipes?
There's two pipes, one for food and water, one for air.
So
The esophagus is food and water, the trachea is for air.
Then why do you call it esophagus?
Because that's something, you also cough because your lungs are congested to expel that.
Is that why?
Yeah.
Two like things, you open your mouth, it's like one that way.
Well, they're in the same location really, but there's a flap that covers the trachea when you swallow food in your esophagus. This process that moves food down your esophagus, it's about 25 centimeters long. Your esophagus goes from the back of your mouth down into your stomach, and it's lined with muscles, smooth muscle. And what happens is the muscles at the top start contracting first, and then as it goes down, the other muscles contract, squeezing the food down. It's like squeezing like all the toothpaste out of a container. You just squeeze it from the end, and you can squeeze it all out. That's how you swallow. So food doesn't just like drop into your stomach because of gravity. Okay? It actually gets squeezed down there. You could drink a glass of water standing on your head if you had a straw. Because of this process. Just like you could push the tube of toothpaste up even though it's against gravity.
Asking that last night.
The body's like,
Yeah.
No, that's not even possible. I was like,
It is possible. Stand on your head, get a straw, drink some water, you could swallow it.
How do you stand in your head?
I'm gonna do it like
water until I get
Drink the water. All right.
How does that work?
Eventually, this food moves from the esophagus into the stomach. So the stomach is basically a pouch made of muscle. And inside of the stomach, there are glands which create enzymes and also stomach acid. So the contents of your stomach are very acidic. It has what's called hydrochloric acid, which helps the enzymes to work to break down these foods that you eat. And so in your stomach, it's a muscle, and it sort of churns all this food that you ate around, and it mixes it with the stomach acids, mixes it with the enzymes, so that the food over time breaks down and is digested. It takes a few hours usually for food in your stomach to be fully digested and ready to move on to the small intestine. It takes a few hours. And during that time, that food's becoming broken down more and more. It turns into this sort of milky, soupy mixture called chyme that then moves into the small intestine. And so, everybody has vomited before, I would guess. And so depending on when, if you get sick soon after you've eaten something, then your foods are fairly recognizable. If it's been a few hours since you've eaten, then that food is less recognizable because over that time it's been broken down into those simpler pieces. Elizabeth? Excuse me?
Can you throw up cheese and cramps?
What? Sure. Yeah, Ryan?
I remember 2 years ago, we were going to Pennsylvania and it was like a snowstorm, and my uncle doesn't know how to drive because he's
Okay,
really young.
let's get to the digestion part.
Oh yeah. So we were like eating in the car, and I ate like these chocolate mini muffin things.
Yeah.
And then I threw up, and it was like red, and then you could see these little chunks of muffins. And
Dude, that's your intestine.
I did like gummies and stuff.
Alright.
It's not gross.
Nick?
When you throw up the yellow stuff, is that your stomach acid?
All right, so yeah, let's talk about that.
That stuff burns.
So vomiting is actually, how is vomiting helpful? How could it be a positive adaptation? Alex? Yes, in that vomiting is a reaction. It's how our body responds to try to get rid of things that could be harmful. So if you eat some chicken that was undercooked and had bacteria on it, you get food poisoning. You might vomit repeatedly. If a person drinks too much alcohol, their body reacts by vomiting to try to get rid of that so that it doesn't build up in their bloodstream. If you swallow certain poisonous substances, your body immediately reacts by vomiting. It's to try to get rid of these things that could be harmful.
Okay, how do you just like swallow poison and not?
So food gets down through your esophagus, into your stomach through this peristalsis, contraction of the muscles. Vomiting is those muscles working the opposite way and squeezing that mixture of food back up. And it is helpful in certain ways. Yes, Carrie?
Does it like build up in your neck, like right there?
Ew.
Because I can't feel that.
Ew.
But what happens? So how does your mouth feel before you're going to be sick?
Like hold the water.
Yes, so that also is another adaptation. When your body is getting ready, and you're going to be sick because something's trying to get rid of something, your mouth waters, lubricating your mouth, lubricating your esophagus, so that as you vomit, you don't damage it. So that's why your mouth feels like that. And so eventually, when I was a kid, I was a little younger than you guys, I had appendicitis. My appendix got infected. In a single day, I threw up 30 times.
I bet you I could beat that.
I mean, my dad was taking me to the hospital, and on our way, I had to just keep my head out the side of the car. Yeah, so I had my appendix removed. It was probably within a few hours
Were you
of
throwing up
bursting.
at the surgery? Like,
No.
when you-
No, it was probably a couple hours from bursting.
Wait, so if it bursts, we're gonna die.
So if your appendix bursts, so
Yes.
your appendix can become infected with bacteria. It's a little section of your intestine, and if it does get infected with bacteria, and it bursts, then that bacteria spreads inside of your body, into your body cavity, and you could die from it. You could get very, very sick from it. So they always, your appendix bursting because of infection is definitely a bad thing, but it doesn't mean you definitely die.
It's good because my
Well, I was at the aunt's house.
Oh
and
God.
I felt sick, so I told her I felt like I was gonna throw up, and they told me to shut up and go back to bed. Then I threw up.
Yeah. All right, Benton.
yeah, it's the drain.
No, but you can choke on it. You can inhale. If you vomit and inhale that and choke, you can choke on that.
You
My
can choke on your
Mr.
Yeah.
Gross, could you like throw up and breathe, like suck in air at the same time and have it go down?
That's what you just said.
That's
Yeah,
'cause
you
you
can-
fight-
yeah, it's choking on vomit.
You
Yeah.
only got 2 puffs, dude.
Wait, isn't vomit liquid though?
Not necessarily. Depends how
That
fully
is gross.
digested
Why
it
would
is.
coffee-
Mine was
what if it's
chunky.
bad digestive?
That it's mostly liquid,
So then how do you choke on it?
and then it can get in your lungs, and then it can cause things in your
So you
lungs.
can still choke on
All right, yes, Jordan. You're on the ocean or on a boat, just can change your equilibrium, and so it just makes people feel motion sickness. All right, Elizabeth. Bianca, question?
Is that why? Wait,
No.
don't you have to like make babies like on their stomach or something? Because
Yeah. Well, because of there's a sudden infant death syndrome is sort of this kind of mysterious way that doctors don't fully understand, but sometimes babies, they die in their sleep overnight. The scientists aren't sure exactly what happens. And so what they found, though, that babies that are put to sleep on their back have a much lower likelihood of this. It's called SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. Well, that once they're able to roll over, they're past the time when this affects them. It's with the very young infants, like between 0, maybe 3 months. So that's why you put them to sleep on their
I
back.
have a theory why they
All
die
right,
on
well-
No, because their ribs are too
All
soft
right,
to
Nick,
develop,
I
then
think
it comes
probably
into their
you're-
heart, and then they die and they draw blood.
You become a researcher and you
Oh, alright,
investigate.
I'll do that.
Let's do it.
All right, so from our stomach, food moves into the small intestine. Oh, you guys asked about this. So, more vomit. But anyway, so once you vomit 2 or 3 times probably, if you ever gotten really sick, so all the contents of your stomach are gone. But if you continue to feel sick and your body continues to vomit, then what ends up happening is stomach acids along with a mixture of enzymes and bile start coming on. So if you ever throw up several times and it starts to have that really bitter, gross tasting, greenish yellow stuff that you throw up, that's the mixture of stomach acid and bile and other enzymes, because there's nothing left in your stomach, no actual food for your body to get rid of. Bianca?
why do you drink ginger ale when you're sick?
Ginger is supposed to help people not get, help relieve nausea. Like if you go on a ship or something, sometimes they'll give you like ginger snap cookies because ginger is supposedly a remedy to help
Those things
nausea.
are-
I don't know how well it works, but
Grandma always buys those.
yes, that's,
How does Crohn's disease affect?
Crohn's disease is like an infection of the intestines and inflammation of the wall of the intestine and the stomach, and so it leads to a whole series of difficulties digesting food and things like that.
Oh, I remember one time I threw up and it was great. How was it great?
It just depends on the foods you ate and what was in your stomach. Nick,
Why do you throw up the yellow stuff? If there's like nothing else to throw up, then why do you even throw up?
because just your body is still, it's just for certain
It's an attack.
times your body's just trying to get rid of everything, and even after all the food's gone from your stomach, you still continue to get sick. All right, we gotta get moving on here. Yeah, Tyler. This is not just a one-time I threw up story, right? Okay, go.
Kind of it. But
Alright,
I had
yes.
stomach virus, but then like after like a lot of times I threw up, I was throwing up like air. I was like trying to.
Yeah, because eventually there's nothing really left. Also, sometimes
You can't choke on air, but you can throw it out.
people that get sick repeatedly, like for example, if somebody has bulimia and they make themselves throw up continually, daily, that process eventually, we'll talk about stomach acid too, but acid from your stomach can damage your esophagus and can sort of start to damage it. It also, tooth enamel reacts with acids and it starts to break down. So a person that makes themselves throw up repeatedly, eventually their teeth start to break down, they damage their esophagus, and it's one of the reasons, many reasons why that's such a dangerous thing. So anyway, the other thing I want to tell you is that if sometimes there's a little valve between your stomach and your esophagus that opens and closes. Sometimes it stays open, and sometimes some stomach acid can creep up into your esophagus. And you know what that's called? I know
Going up.
It leads to pain in a person's esophagus. Heartburn. Heartburn is when acid from the stomach creeps up into the esophagus and it hurts, it causes burning. Also, acid reflux is when this happens regularly. And it can eventually, if a person gets it all the time, it can damage their esophagus. So they may have like an acid reducing drug, or like Tums, those little chalky things. Those are called antacids. They neutralize acid in your esophagus so that that heartburn goes away. All right, quickly, Bianca.
What are the hiccups?
That's more related to your respiratory system. It's just basically a convulsion of your diaphragm.
Can't you die?
Could you throw up and go number 2 at the same time?
All right.
What?
So,
You can't die from
small intestine. Yeah, Tyler.
It's acid reflux on like your throat hurts.
Yeah, well, it hurts in your chest because this acid is damaging your esophagus. All right. Well, anyway, from your stomach, food or chyme moves on into this, but it's actually very long. It's about 25 feet long. Your small intestine. It's all wound up inside of your abdomen, and as food moves along that small intestine,
Why is it called small? It can't be
because it's narrow.
If it wants to be.
Because it's all wound up like that inside of you.
How does nothing get like bottleneck?
Because it just moves along there. It moves through this action of peristalsis. It's squeezed along the way. And along the way, different enzymes move into the small intestine. They're secreted there to break down the food even further. And it's also where the nutrients are absorbed. So the reason that we eat is to absorb all those nutrients from our foods. And so they're absorbed in the small intestine. It's where most digestion and the absorption of nutrients happens. Like I said, along the way, different enzymes are added to the food. And so that's to break it down even further. So some of the enzymes, one is produced in the liver. So your liver is a large organ, and it produces a substance called bile. And bile is an enzyme that breaks down fat. So any food that you eat that has fat in it, bile helps to break it down.
Why are people fat?
It's not related to the digestion of fat. It's too sort of, it breaks down fat in the food situation, not fat that's stored in your body. And so that's produced by the liver. It's a greenish, yellowish liquid. And also the liver is another organ that removes poisons from your blood. It has another function besides just making bile. But the liver has attached to it a little area that stores up bile. It's called the gallbladder. You can see it's sort of underneath the liver. And this gallbladder stores bile until it's needed. So your liver makes bile, sends it to the gallbladder. It can be stored until you eat some food that has fat in it, and then your gallbladder sends it into your small intestine. So passes the bile into the small intestine through this little tube that's called the bile duct. Now sometimes people can get an infection in the gallbladder. Sometimes little cholesterol deposits build up there and form what's called gallstones. And it can be very painful. Sometimes a person may have their gallbladder removed. So you can live without your gallbladder. And if you do have your gallbladder removed, it means bile is not stored up, but it's made in the liver and goes directly into the intestine through that bile duct.
People get like very skinny.
No, not necessarily, but sometimes if a person has had their gallbladder removed, they have to be careful. because if they eat a meal that's high in fat, they don't have that stored up bile to help digest it. They just have bile being produced directly from the liver, so it may not be able to break down that fat and may lead to like problems digesting the fat, may lead to pain as it's digested. Peter? It's the same idea related to the kidneys, so we'll talk about that in the next section.
What's it made of?
Sometimes calcium. Pancreas is another organ that produces enzymes called pancreatic juices. And that one you want to drink for breakfast. These juices are a mixture of enzymes that break down various stuff in the food. And also, as you know, from endocrine system, the pancreas also makes insulin. But that's not really a digestive enzyme. The small intestine, the inside of it, it's not smooth. It's not like a hose. It's not just this tube that's smooth on it. It actually has all of these ridges. They're called villi. And they kind of look like little fingers poking up from the intestine. And what these villi do is they give a very large surface area for your intestines to absorb nutrients. And inside of them, there's blood vessels. And those blood vessels are able to absorb things like the glucose and the vitamins and the amino acids from the foods that we eat. They have to get into our blood through these villi. And so by the time food's made its way, this is again 25 feet long, by the time the food makes its way all the way through the small intestine, you're talking 12, 14, 16 hours for it to make it. Once it gets towards the end, almost all of the nutrients and the carbohydrates and the proteins have been absorbed into the blood, and all that's left is the stuff that couldn't be digested, that couldn't be broken down. And that moves finally into the large intestine, the last part of the digestive system. The large intestine is called large, not because it's long, but because it's wider than the small intestine. It's much shorter, actually. And the large intestine reabsorbs extra water that's still left in that mixture so that our bodies can conserve that water. There is some absorption of certain vitamins and things in the large intestine. By the time that food's gotten to the large intestine, it's completely digested. Okay? Yeah. Exclamation point. And so by the time this food has made its way to the large intestine, all that's left is stuff that could not be digested. And then that makes the large intestine goes up, across the body, back down the left side, and back over, and eventually leads out. We're not done there, no yet. And so, along the way, water gets reabsorbed, and all that's left is what we call feces. And that is then eliminated out of the body through the rectum, through the anus. So, you've heard that part is called the colon. So you've also probably heard of a colonoscopy. So a colonoscopy is when they use a camera to look inside of your colon and large intestine, because colon cancer is a fairly common type of cancer, and so they use this camera to look inside the colon to be sure there are no tumors and no damage to the large intestine. And so that's what a colonoscopy is. All right, last slide.
Oh, that's the esophagus.
We did though. So let's name the parts. Let's follow the path of food. The mouth isn't shown, but from the mouth, raise your hand. Tell me what's the next path? Esophagus. Then it goes. This is not. Then behind that organ is this. What is this one where the food goes through? That's the stomach.
Oh, it's far out.
Yeah, it's up pretty high. You know, people say they have a stomach ache and it hurts down here. That's not their stomach.
your
Your stomach's up high near your rib cage.
Then how does your
Yeah, it's up high, just under your rib cage.
and your
is your stomach.
intestines work?
A lot after the stomach, then what?
Internal organs.
Here's small intestine. All this stuff wound up inside of your abdomen. After that, where does the food go after that?
Large intestine.
Large intestine. That's up, cross, over, down, and out. Along the way, the organs that produce the enzymes, food doesn't actually go through this organ. What is it? That's the liver. Or, and it does this, it's underneath the liver?
Pancreas.
No.
Oh, the
That's the gallbladder. When we look in the frogs, you're going to have to lift up one of the lobes of the liver, and there's a little pea-sized thing under that's green. That's the gallbladder. It's sort of underneath the liver. And finally, underneath the stomach, pancreas. Peter?
Why is the right arm bigger than the left?
What's that?
Oh yeah, why?
Dude, it's science.
I don't know. All right.
Wait, do you get points off if you don't touch the
Touch the frog?
like if you don't poke it or anything?
Okay.
If you don't
No,
slice it.
you're going to have to know the parts inside of the frog.